All right, thank you. Okay, so I post the slides in the Microsoft Team group. You can download if you want. It's advisable to download as well because there's some codes that I want you to test out. Okay, so far, what have you learned from class with Miss Un or Dr. Raymond?
Dr. Rahman's class, we learned HTML and HTML5 and then CSS.
CSS, okay.
But he hasn't finished CSS this week yet.
Okay, never mind. Since we didn't know basic HTML, which is good because for today's lab session, we will not cover so much on CSS. So today we're just covering more on HTML and other attributes and elements and tags that we can use for your assignment for your probably future FYP project as well. Okay, so we will start from the basics. So in HTML, we want to create a file. We usually have to start with the idoc type HTML. The reason why is because it represents the document type and helps browsers to display web pages correctly. So if you want to write a web page and you don't put the doc type, the file usually won't be read. The entire document will not be read, and therefore will be quite pointless. And then you will open with the HTML tag because the HTML tag will begins the document or the HTML document itself. Okay, and remember that HTML and other tags, usually most of the tags have a closing tag that you need to write. If you do not, then usually that the entire body or the dissection of that part that you've written will not be read by the program. Okay, so next we have it.
Sorry,
Excuse me.
I think your slide is not moving. I think we're seeing the PowerPoint instead of the slideshow.
Alright, sorry.
Okay.
It's okay now. Okay. Okay. Here you can see that that's the basic writing method or writing scheme for HTML files. We put a doc type with the HTML tag and then the head tag. Remember the head tag is just a container for metadata. And the head usually where you just write your CSS files. And mostly like stylization or you want for on mostly on stylization. And then you have the body. So the body is where most of the visible part of the document that you want to display. So if you want to display the box, the paragraph or the header, this is where you put it. So like say in example here, heading H1. So H1 is for the header and the size differs by number. So 1 until 6. So the biggest header will be H1 and the smallest will be H6 and so on. And then we have P, paragraph. So paragraph usually is a uniform size unless we change it from the CSS file we put in the header or the head tag. Okay. So far, everybody understand the basics? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So in class, did Dr. Raymond or Miss Un ask you to download any text editor software?
Dr. Rahman mentioned about Notepad++, I think, for Windows, but he also mentioned that we can use VS Code.
Okay.
And for HTML and CSS, he also introduced us a web-based editor, which you can see HTML and CSS side to side.
All right. Okay. Good. So, for every lab session, you usually required to open your web editor because in every session we will try to practice on coding. and we can test out the codes for today, if possible. If to those who have Node++ or downloaded Microsoft Visual Studio Code, hope we can open it. And I want you guys to create a basic HTML page. Okay? Because to this lesson, I want to teach you how to do the basics, a little bit of styling, and then we will create some tables and forms. Okay, to those who haven't downloaded anything yet, I highly recommend downloading Visual Studio Code because its ability to run HTML document is more efficient, and then it also helps you in terms of the library you can download and the live server, which is another program that for you to instantly display the product. But it's just another what do you say, text editor, but it's more flexible so that you can, if you use the software, you can use it for other subjects as well. Okay, if you look on the screen right now, you can see that this is Visual Studio Code, and here you can see that here is all the, this is an activity we can do later. What it does is that if you download this extension, which is called Live Server, it helps you to run instantaneously without any issue, like this, which you can use for, let me check again, share. Yes, it will let you display instantaneously through the temporary server that it provides. Okay. If you want to use Notepad++, it's okay as well. Make sure that when you run it, make sure you save it in a file location or the path that is easy for you to find. Okay. You can try and copy paste the basic code in your text editor later on. And let's continue with the next slide, which is called styles. So styles here, there is two methods. So you can either do in the head, like I mentioned before, or you can directly do it at the tags. Okay, for example here, if you try to run this short section of a code in your text editor, you can see that in the body style, I put background color powder blue. And then you can see in the paragraph section, you can see there's multiple different styles, like the color of the text, or the alignment of the text, or the font size. Okay, so this is one way of stylizing your document, which is directly into the tag. If you don't want to do the tag, we can do here like this example, which we put it in the header. Here, when you want to do in the header, you make sure that before you want to stylize anything, you need to write the which tag that you want to stylize. So here, for example, I highlighted body. So when you say body, you will highlight everything that is within the body tag. So within the entire body tag will be background color will be powder blue. And here H1 will be color red because we highlight here H1 we want it to be red. So both Both methods are correct, but the issue with it is that with the header style, you are generalizing everything. So if let's say if I have multiple H1s and not all of them I want to make color red. So if I put here H1 color red, all of my H1 will be red. But then if you want to generalize a specific tag, it's easier to do in the header method. If you do very specifically like this, it's good because you want to specify on which area you want to stylize. But the issue is that it is very tiring and it's quite repetitive, that also clutters your code. Okay. Okay, next is tables. Okay. Okay. You can, if you downloaded the slide just now, you can go to this slide and copy paste the section of this code. Make sure that you put in the doc.html and the body and so on. So this is just a small section part of the table. So table, remember that table, it has its own tag. Remember when you open the tag, you have to close it. So like this, for example, we have table style with 100%. Okay. When you want to style anything, especially in width or height, there's two methods you can do. Either you can write it in percent, or you can write it in px. Px is usually followed by the size of the pixels. And you think 100 px is quite a lot, depending on the content size and your container size. 100 px is not a lot. But if you put 100%, then you will use the entire page of the document that your screen supports. Okay, so when it says table width is 100%, the entire table will be 100% in terms of width. Okay, next you have the TR. So TR represents table row. Okay, in table row, you also need to have a closing tag for it to function properly, and within the row you have TH, which is the table header. So here your table header is usually elements are bold and centered. That is by default. So you put first name, last name, and age. So this is first row is mostly your header, and your second TR, your next row will just be your content. So it'll be TD. It's either it's called table data or cell. So by default, elements are regular size and regular writing and left aligned. Right. So you get Jill Smith at 50, Eve Jackson 94. So when you try to run this code, you can see that it tabulates in that order. Okay, so far can everybody follow?
Yes.
Okay. So another method of you want to style your table. Here you can see that we are in the head tag or the header. And here we can see this is how we stylize. Again, we have to highlight or we have to write the tag that we want to stylize. So here we have table, we have the header, and we have the data. Here we can see that we have put the border, which is 1 px solid black, 1 pixel solid black, and then we have border collapse. Okay, the reason why we have border collapse, if you try to remove it, you can see that your borders have a lot of spaces. And if you collapse it, then it will usually be like a regular table with one line. And then here you can see that the format here of the border, the size, the type, and the color. So for borders, you can have a lot of different types. You can change color, you can change the size. So solid is very basic. You can write lines, you can do dots, and colors. You can change whatever color you like. You can either write the color or you can use the color code. Okay. So next you can see here, TH and TD. We want to have a padding. So padding is just basically spaces that you want to cushion the text. So padding usually helps to make it not cluttered by the user's eye. So you can look like it's very marginalized, marginalized from the spaces. And then the TH in the header, we want it to align to the left. Okay. 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 So next, let's learn about ID. Okay. When we want to stylize a, how to say, a very specific tag, usually like I just now we can say I, yeah, the tag like h1. Okay, h1. But when you put an ID, it's very specific on the tag that you want to write. So here we see in h1, the ID is called my header, and my header is referring to this h1 tag. So when you go back to stylize, the style in the header, make sure you have to write your hashtag my header. So because you can either hashtag or can use dot, but mostly or people can use hashtag because it's quite common. And then in that header, in the ID, we write the background color, we want the color and the padding and text alignment. So this is ID. You make sure that the ID has to be unique within the entire document, so that when you want to stylize a specific ID, you can search for it. Okay, so far can everybody understand about tables and ID? Okay. Next, let's continue with forms. When you want to create a table, right? A, a table is a very simple form of organizing text. But forms are different. Forms are like what you usually use to register or sign up to a application. And forms is also a different kind of tag that you need to remember, that it has an opening, it has an end. And what is a form is that it's a container for different types of input elements. So when you want to create a form, it's definite that you need to have input text inside. Okay. For example, in this form tag, you can see that in the first opening tag, you see action. So action is usually referring to what does the form perform. So here is the action slash action underscore page.php. This is just a sample where when the form is done, when you hit the submit button, it will continue the action that was predetermined in the code. Okay, and now let's look at the body of the form. So remember we went to write label. We have a label tag. What does it do? A label has a many form of elements, and you can see that in for equals to f name. So for should be equal to the ID, which is I just taught just now. So ID and for is the same. And then we can see that here in the first name, it close tag and br. Okay, br means break line. So you want to write a text and then you want to break to the next line, just use the tag br. And then continue the last name is the same thing. It's just a input text ID. So this is another form of text you want to write, which is called action page .php. Same thing. You want to is in actually you want to continue after submitting. Here this is called text area. Unlike the normal text input. Text area is usually for larger text content. You can see that it has multiple line text input and can hold unlimited number of characters. Okay, hold on. Okay, so now let's look at this example of just now, the text. Okay. When you want to write a form, make sure that it's in the correct order. You can see here in the outline that we have the HTML tab with the header, body, and form. So when we want to run, we open Live Server. Here. Here you can see that we have our first name and last name. Here we have a text is due because we have given a value of John and Doe. Here in this input line, okay, we create an input which is a type text, and input has many different type. For this occasion, we use text, and then we have an ID. Remember, an ID is important if you want to change anything, and later on when you want to write for PHP or SQL, an ID is necessary for saving and deleting content or text. Okay, and then we say that in the name is usually same, it's like a placeholder, and then we have put the value. So the value is John, so it's already predetermined that the name is John. Same thing as the last name, which is called Doe. Okay, so now let's look at text area. When in text area we have the text area tag, and this text area tag, you can see in example we have a name, and the name example here is message. Okay, the rows and columns are usually to determine the size of the text area that you want to place. So if you run this, you see here. So what I've written is we create a 10 row and 30 column the size, and you can see that the placement of the words here are written. So if you require to write a large amount of text, like address, or you want to create a review or feedback, so this is the tag that you need to use. Okay, so now let's continue with the next element in form is called radio buttons. So in radio buttons, we what is a radio button is that it's like one of those buttons you find in your form that requires you to select. So for example, here is gender. So input type radio. So that this is the tag that you need to use if you want to use a radio button. And what does it do? So it lets users to select one of a limited number of choices. So when you want to select only one of many options, then you need to use radio. So here you can see we copy paste the code for radio buttons. And when you want to run it, you can make sure you check everything. So we have the type radio and we have the ID mail. And next we have the name, the placeholder which is gender, and we have the value which is the text that you want to display and the value of the button. So here you can see that we have all these buttons. Okay, and like I said before, with radio button you can only choose one. Later on, when you have done your CSS class, you can actually customize more the radio button due to the way you want it, either square, triangle, or icons, and so on. Okay. Next, let's look at checkboxes. So checkboxes we use for if you want to select 0 or more options of a limited number of choices. So just like if you ever use Google Docs, you can, or what you call that, those Google survey questionnaires that you usually receive from other students. There's checkboxes, you can select more than one. So this is one of the methods. Here you try to run this. Okay, so here we have the checkbox element. You are able to check more than once. Okay. Okay, and so far can everybody follow? Okay. Next we have a drop down list. Okay, so a drop down list is usually when you want to create a form with multiple choice that is easy to see when the users select. And one thing about listing, we have two kinds, which is data list and drop down list. And this is based on the level or what version of HTML that is used. So drop down list usually used in HTML4, and data list usually use HTML5. Okay. So I'm going to show you both of this, and by comparison, and you can see the difference. Okay. Okay, so the above code here, and this is what we use for drop list. So drop list is just that it gives you an option for you to use, and then you select. But here is a data list. A data list, even though they give you a list, you are still able to edit your own. So here you say if you don't have your options, so you write example like Bing. It's still a acceptable input. So to tell the difference was between drop list and data list, you can say that a drop list is mostly you have no option to choose if within outside the range of suggestions they provide. But for data list, you're able, even though it's just a suggestion of the list they give it to you, but you can still write what you want. Okay. So that is the main difference between drop-down list and data list. Okay, next we have another, it's called input type color. So input type color is just basically a simple code for you to choose a color scheme. Remember that the unique keyword here is color. So when you write the input type color here, this is a how to say, the program will instantly will try to write that specific features to the web document. So for example, if I try to run this, okay, if you want to get the slides, okay, you go to your Teams, go to the session on Wednesday 2 to 4 and look for the files header. You can see the slides there. You can go and download it. Okay, so this is the input type color. Here you see when you select the color box, you can actually adjust the color as you like, and then that's it. So this is input type color. Okay, so now we have input type dates. Here, date is very specific on the features that you want to use. You can write the date as a text, no problem. But using a date format is so much easier, as well as it's easier to distinguish what is a text file and what is a date feature. Okay, here we can see that this is the input date for date. Here you can type it as you wish as well. For example, this, or you can select the calendar icon and you can select the months that you wish to choose. Okay, so this is date. It is a much clearer and more efficient way for the input to collect data in terms of dates. So next we have input type email. Okay. So email is just another form of text, but the reason why we have a different kind of tag for it is because when you put input text file as email, it usually automatically validates when submitted. And when it recognizes that it is an email, it usually helps to, let's say, if you're aware of that you're in your use Google Chrome or other internet browsers, sometimes you save your information, your name, your email, your phone number. Okay, so when you put an email tag, whatever saved information you have regarding your email, it usually just pop up immediately because it recognizes that this text file is an email rather than just a normal text file. So I'll show you. So even though it looks like a basic text file, we can see that here, my Google Chrome, it saves my email address. So when it recognizes that this particular tag or feature that it is an email tag, so whatever save email, it will automatically give under suggestion like this, like a drop-down list. Another thing is that when you write an email tag, you want to submit a form, a registration form, for example. That email will, it's easier for it to be saved in a server or database, and then whatever information that it is how to say processing, it can send you the feedback through your email immediately. Okay, now the last one here is input is called range. Okay, so form action range, here we put the label volume, and here the volume is between 0 to 50, for example. And here you can see the input range is usually a control for entering numbers whose exact value is not important. So it's like a slider control. And then you can set restrictions on what numbers are accepted within minimum, maximum, and step. So by default, input type range is from 0 to 100. So here in the input tab, we see here we put the minimum 0 and maximum 50. This is the range that we set. So if you can see here, we have a volume. So this is what we call a slider. Okay. So this is the slider that you can set from 0 to 50. Okay. So far, does everybody understand all of the text I just taught just now, or is there any one of it that you want me to repeat? Okay. If everybody understood, I want you guys to create a form with all the HTML tags, elements, and attributes that we just learned today. All right? I want you to create something like this. Okay. So here you can see that I was able to create a form. And then at the same time that even even though it looks as a form, but it's actually a table that is used as a form. So download the slides if you haven't, and try to create this form. Right? Once you're done, you can share your screen and show me the output. Once everybody's done, I will show you the code. I will give you the code through the Microsoft Team for you to see. All right. I'll give you about 20 minutes. Is that okay? Because all the tags and elements are already in the slides. You can use it. All right. Has anybody completed yet? To those who have, can you share the screen? If you can't,
Not done yet.
not done yet. Okay, to those who have done, just let me know. We share the screen. We can all see together. To those who are still doing, which part do you find it difficult to do? Has anybody finished yet? Which part do you find it difficult? The table part, okay. So the basic thing you should do is remember the form tag, open and close form tag, and inside there you put in the table. And inside the table, you only create 2 columns. And then you see all the elements inside here, you put in into each row. You can copy paste the code from the slides as a into it, as long that you put it in the column and row section correctly. So just now I taught you just now, if you go to the slides, if you copy the code for the table and you run it, you can see that there is 2 columns. And the 2 columns is already done. You just need to insert more rows. And just change the content on each of the cells, and then you're able to display. It doesn't have to look exactly like this in terms of the width. As long that you put the contents in it, it's okay. Adjusting the width of each of the row columns, I will later on show you how. Remember that this year of study is the drop-down list. You have no option to write whatever you want. You have to choose what is given. And favorite subject, you can either write or you can select what is given. This is what we call data list. Okay, I think there will be enough time to do. Okay, can everybody finish? Is there anyone completed the task? Okay, never mind. To those who partially finish, uh, can you please show by sharing the screen? Okay. Yes, my first subject should be data list. Can you show me? Still halfway. Is there a drop down list for it? The math, science. Alright. And the data list? A data list mean the drop list? Your study? You are able to change it. Okay. Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay, everyone, I already uploaded my example of the task, the registration form in the file section. You can go download it. Okay. Now you can download it and you can see it through, for example, or you can see it through the screen. It's okay. So the example that I showed you just now was a combination of everything what we learned just now, from creating a table to creating a form and the other tags and elements that we use for input in the forms. Okay, so remember that we always start with the doc.html and then we have our header. Here in the header, we can see that I only write for the table or all the way here for the table content. And then also here you see the input with auto. So with auto is a usage for if you don't want to create a small text input or a large one, on auto will be automatic on the size based on the uh, size that is in the container is. So in this case, the size of the table. So this is the stylization for the document. And let's look at the body. So the body, we have registration form and we say fill in the form. So we header 2 and we have a paragraph. So now we want to create a form. So the form is the first thing that we want to create. One thing about HTML coding is that it is nested. What I mean nested is that you can stack other tags and features onto each other as long as you follow in an order that you want to execute it. So for this case, we want to execute a form rather than a table. A table is just a placeholder to contain our information, but the action we want it to perform as a form. So here we have to create a form. So here you can see that in the form, we also have the opening and closing form, which is very important. Next, we have action. So action is just a very simple sample. Here you don't need to write anything, you can put as blank because I want to perform an action, which is just to move to the next page. Okay. Once the form container, I call it a container. So within the form container is complete. Now I just need to fill in the container. So the next step is we create a table. The table you just see just now, we got two columns, right? So we have a table and I put a style. So this is very specific to the width. So I put it 50%, half the page or half the page of what the document can support. So next we have the TR. So this is the table header. We will just put title, right? Here you can see that in that first row, you can see title and the next to it is blank. If you don't want it, you can just insert anything like we say input, and it's okay. If you don't want it blank, you can leave it blank. It's just a header or to list down the column. So now let's move to the rows. So like just now, we have full name. Remember that I put the style here with 25% to adjust the column size. What I'm doing is adjusting the column size. So when I put here 25%, I don't need to put on the rest because when you adjust one cell within the column, everything has to follow. So I put the width 25%, Then I write the text full name. This is the first data, table data, the first cell. So within that same row, the second data cell will be our input. So it's just a name, we just put input text. Remember, we have a ID. This is important because in ID later on, when you want to do PHP or SQL, an ID is important when you want to register. Same thing with matrix number, is the same as full name. You can copy paste, no problem. The only difference is you change the ID and the name. Then date of birth, we use the input type dates for the birthday, because you want to have that function where you can select the date. Next, email. Remember this, we use input type email. We can use text, but remember, when you want to use email, it's better to use the email type, because later on when you want to register anything, the email tag is easier to identify and you can perform other functions rather than the normal text type. So now we see the address. So the address, we want to make it big, because an address you put one, if you put input text, it will be too small and it's quite hard for the user to adjust, because I know some address are long, so we use text area. In this text area, we put the name address. Remember, name and ID are similar. And then we have rows and columns. So I put 5 rows and 30 columns to have that size. Okay, so now we move to gender. So gender, this is where I use the radio button. So remember, input type radio, and then we put the ID male, we put the name gender, and we put the value male. Then the label is what is written, we put male. So this, when you completed one, you just copy paste, just change the name. So transport is the same thing. We put input type checkbox. We put the ID, the name, and the value. Okay, the value, it determines on what kind of value does the label hold. So this is a car, so just put the word car. Same goes for bus and foot. Same thing, you just copy paste and done. And then the year of study. So this is the drop list, which is used in HTML4. So the options, we have year 1, 2, and 3, 4, which is you cannot write anything. It's just a given. You have to choose. Your favorite subject is we use data list. Where you remember, we use input list. We change the name to list, and so that you can identify on what we're referring to. Even we give an ID to subs. And same thing, option, value, and we give an option. So the last two is favorite color, which is a new row. Remember, a new row, tr, a new row, and then within that row we put the label, favorite color, and then we just copy paste what from the slides, type color, and then here the only adjustment I did was this, because when I tried to run it, the size was not visible, so I put the width to 10%. Okay, either you can put it to start here, or you can do it on top. And now the last one is how much do you love yourself, between 1 and 100. This is simple, just copy paste, and that's it. Then you close the table. Remember that we close the table, and you see here the BR, I'm making an extra line so that we can put the submit button as well as the reset button. Okay, so input type submit. So submit type is usually for submission files, so especially in forms. So when you submit, every information that is written or chosen will move forward based on the action attribute that you put in the opening form tag. For the reset, is a default button. It just resets everything. You just empty every input text. If it has a value, it will bring back to the default value, and then we will close form. Okay, so this is a sample of what I just showed you just now. Now let me show you another sample of this one, the favorite color. Okay, so since here I put here style with 10%. Okay, what if I want to not write it here and put it on top? We can. What you do is remember that what's the ID? Faith color, right? So we go on top here. So for this example, okay. Now, so when you run it, it still remain the same. Let's say if I want to change, so I just change from 10 to 20. So now you can see that it expands more or elongate more. So wherever it is, for example, you put here. So you submit. So see, when you put an email type, you can see that when I submit, the browser understands that this is a email content and it needs to have the specific uh, element, which is the A button. What I forgot, it's called add button. And if it's not present, then it's not able to write. So imagine if I remove the name and I go submit. Same thing. I remove this. You're able to do it. But as long as the email does not have the what you call it, the add button, then it will not continue. But when you press reset, everything will be reset. Okay. Okay. Can everybody understand so far?
How do you format the table, as in the spacing in between the words and the border? I think you accidentally muted.
Or sorry. Okay. You mean you mean both columns or only the title column?
Um, all the columns.
All the columns.
Yeah, it's like the word and between the border. Mine
Word
is very
between the
right, and then yours is very like near to the line.
near to the line.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me show you to the table. Okay. So if you see that the wording is near to the border, so I go back to my style here in my table in my row, the first row, right? So one thing about this is that you have to play around with it on the size no matter because the last row, the label is quite long. So you have to estimate on how much you want to write it. For example, if I say here, I put here instead of 25, I put 15. Yeah, you can see that now it is shorter and all my words are cluttered. So you have to play around with it. If you want to make it neat and straight, you have to play around with the width, the height, the padding, and so on. Is there anything else?
Sorry, can I share my screen?
Sure thing.
Can you see my screen?
Okay, yes, yeah.
You see, it's very white in between the words and the border.
All right.
Yeah. How to adjust this? Because yours is very packed to the side.
All right. Okay, so now let's look at your style
Oh,
style
sorry.
header.
Just put like this.
All right.
Is it this one?
Yeah, your first TR. All right. So your THD you put padding 15%. That's why
This one?
your padding
This one. Oh,
your
okay.
padding is too big. Try to put it front pads. Your THDD style and save it and try to run it again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So your padding, like I said, is like a cushion. So if you want to create a big padding, it creates a big space. So if you want to make it neat, you have to play around with it. So your padding, your alignment, your centering, your width, length, height, you have to test with the content that you want to put. So if it's all text, then it's easy to manage. For example, if image or if it is an icon, you have to estimate on where you want to adjust the centering or you want to make it a different alignment. Okay, is there anything else you want to, if you don't understand? Okay, if there is no further questions, I will end the class. To those who have not scanned, you can scan now. And make sure you go through the slides I give you and the code I give you. You try to practice with it. Try to play around with it. And if you have any questions, you can message me through WhatsApp. Miss Uno created a group already. Or you can send a message through this Microsoft Teams. But I can't guarantee that I will reply on time.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so about the submit button, right?
Yes.
Um, the, I mean, does the submit button need to be at the same table? If I put it outside of the table, for example, the submit button, that line, it doesn't register the data.
Later. Okay. If you put outside the table, it's okay as long as within the form.
Within the form.
Yes, within the
Oh,
form
so it
tab.
must be in the form.
Yes, you cannot put
Okay.
outside. You can put outside the table. If you put it outside the form, it is submitting. It doesn't know what it's submitting.
So does it mean that if I'm writing the submit, I'm writing the form, I just put the form as the general, I mean the bigger column, and then inside the form you have the table.
Yes.
You
You
create
so
the
within.
table. Yeah.
Yeah. So with the big form, within the big form, you put a table in, and
Mm-hmm.
then for the line for submission, make sure it's outside the table but within the form.
Okay, understood.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. If there is no further questions, you are dismissed. To the one that is started the recording, you can end it. And later on, I'll try to share the video but I'm not sure that I'm allowed to. I think the person who recorded have to download